think maybe he said, the sun sets in a blaze of glory, and an artist describes the poetry of creation, and a scientist calculates, the incredible speed of light, and it traverses millions of miles, and and the Jew says, "Time to daven mincha." Yeah, that we can do, right? It says, actually, I'm not sure if it's in this volume or Rashida says, actually, it might be, hold on a second, it might be in, not here, but it says that, it mentions that, like, Terach, the father of Abraham, it says he died in Haran, when they traveled from Orkast and they went to Haran, and then Hashem eventually told them to leave Haran and continue on to the land of Israel. But Terach died in Haran. But as Rashi pointed out, he lived many, many years in Haran after Abraham left. And the Torah, if you read it casually, almost implies that he died, before Abraham even left or shortly after Abraham left. There's no indication that he had many long years of life during all those, the eventful period of Abraham's travels through the land of Israel and other things. And Terach was very much alive for much of that point. So, Rashi says that the Torah wanted to gloss over any indication that Abraham abandoned his father, although, of course, he was supposed to do that, and it was commanded of Hashem. People might read it and get the wrong idea, and look critically at Abraham's behavior. But it also, I think Rashi also mentioned, it's also technically correct as well, because the wicked people, even during their lifetime, were not considered really alive. And I don't know if it's the same medrash or another medrash where it elaborates on that concept, because wicked people are considered to be dead. Why? It says because they see the sunrise, they see the sunset, and they don't make the bracha of Ma'ariv Aravim or So the Rashim explained, wicked people do many bad things, and they also don't do a lot of mitzvahs. And there can be many reasons that if being dead is a function of not living a spiritual life and not fulfilling one's purpose on this earth, which is a plausible explanation. The fact that they don't make a bracha when they see a beautiful sunset, or they don't say the evening marav, it seems to be like the most obvious example of wickedness. The wicked people do, generally a lot worse things than that. So he says that Chazal is telling us something else. Obviously, they don't do mitzvahs, but their lives aren't lives because they don't have any appreciation of the beauty and the emotional depth of what the world is about. When you see a sunset and you bless Hashem, like Rabbi Avigdor Miller was talking about an apple, you bite into an apple and you see the kindness and the brilliance of Hashem's creation. That's living. That's experiencing all the emotions, the deep and profound experience of what eating an apple or seeing a sunset can do for a person. If you don't have that, you have a secular life. It's empty and it's very sterile. And you're really losing, people, they try to pursue culture and they think of high culture, they'll go to the opera or they'll go to a museum, but it's very empty. If it's all secular, you're missing, the heart is not there, the meaning is not there. So that's a good segue into Yisro. Yisro begins with Yisro. It's interesting. The Hasidim, I think, are more inclined to read significance into the names of the Torah portions, and the Litvak would say, well, they divide it up into a bunch of sections so you can read one each week. And they usually pick the first significant word in each parsha. So Yisro you couldn't call it Vayishma because that's too common. So you say Vayishma Yisro. Yisro is the second word. But it is interesting that the parsha which describes the giving of the Torah begins with the story of someone who wasn't even Jewish. And it was the national journey of the Jewish people to become the Jewish people, to receive the Torah, is introduced by the private journey of a non-Jewish person who, on his own, came to embrace the Torah way of life, and again, everything is significant. We rely on Chazal. We don't really say our own midrashim, but um, I don't think it's a stretch to say we do read on Shavuot. We read the story of Rus, who was also a woman who made her own personal journey, and we definitely associate the journey of a non-Jew to a Torah, to becoming a Torah Jew. We view that as like the journey of the Jewish people in this week's parsha from Egypt to becoming the Jewish people.
That one of the reasons for being all over the world, this mass diaspora was to give people a chance to become Gayler.
Yeah, I have heard that. That is an idea. I think it's particularly. It might actually be a Gemara. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure at the very least that idea is found in Kabbalah. Talk about sparks of holiness. Kabbalistic idea in general. They focus on the idea that all of creation. In the Hasidim, you find that in the Hasidic thought that everything has a spark of goodness, or else it couldn't exist at all. And you need to extract the goodness. They talk about the shells, like the badness. Badness is considered shells, klipos. Those are the shells are the blockages that prevent us from getting to that spark of holiness on the inside. The spark of holiness is what you're trying to pull out. So the idea is that the sparks were scattered because of the fragmentation. That sin, all of the holiness kind of got diffused and scattered and hidden, and we have to go through different societies and different cultures and draw out those and reconnect with them. They have to reconnect with us.
The Jews died in Egypt in the plague.
Yeah.
Their spot in the shaman, it was a chance to rejoin the Jews.
Rejoin those people who died in the plague of darkness. Okay. Yeah, look, we certainly. There are certainly echoes of this. We talk about, for example, Moab and Ammon, who were kind of hostile nations, but they were also our cousins. Lot was the nephew of Abraham, who traveled with him on the Lech Lecha journey, but then they parted ways. But they're rejoined because Rus, a Moabite woman, and Naamah, who was the wife of King Shlomo, an Ammonite woman, they rejoined the Jewish people. And it says this, Rashi mentions this, that the Jews are commanded not to attack Ammon and Moab when they're entering the Promised Land, which is centuries before Rus and Naamah appear. But one of the reasons they're not supposed to attack them is that they are destined to produce these two people. So, there seems to be this idea that, you see how Abraham sends Eliezer back to his family to find a wife for Yitzchak. Abraham's family were idol worshippers. We talk about that at the Seder. Abraham was extracted from that family, and it's an interesting thing. Abraham is quintessentially the self-made man, the one who recognizes Hashem and begins to promote awareness of Hashem, and Hashem chooses him. And yet, when we read the Haggadah, we talk about Hashem taking Abraham. We don't say anything about Abraham's. We talk about Hashem's kindness, taking Abraham out of that society. And there's always this idea, no matter what we do, in terms of our own free choices, if Hashem's not there to enable us, we won't go anywhere. And even Abraham Avinu, we talk about almost as if like his own exodus, like Hashem took him out. And we see that when Abraham is ready to get a wife for his son, he sends him back to his family. There's something there. Goes back to, I guess, Shem and Noach, of the three sons of Noach. He was the one that was the most spiritual, Shem and Aver, and things were passed down. Abraham Avinu picked up the thread. And then Lot, who was Abraham's nephew, who happened to be, by the way, Sarah's brother, he also had sparks of holiness, and they traveled through. They came back and rejoined. So it's not at all. The Ramchal writes that there was kind of a window of time. Hashem created the world with a certain mission for mankind, and mankind did not do well. There was a reset at the flood, and again things still didn't go in the right direction. Except for Avraham Avinu was kind of the only one that kind of got the idea and really carried out Hashem's agenda as Hashem wanted for mankind. So Hashem, at that point, gave a final window for humanity, and it was actually this week's part. At the giving of the Torah was the final the last call, closed the period of open admissions for this mission at this point. So the Jewish people kind of have the sole rights to that mission, and the rest of mankind does not. But that's on a national level. On an individual level, we still accept membership.
So that in terms of corporate, the nations with people, there were individuals within the nation
who would have wanted to. Interesting.
And they also had a chance there.
Right, just as we say, that's interesting. Like say, all the Jews were at Mount Sinai, so all the non-Jews also were there, and some of them, right? That's a very interesting idea. Right. So, yeah. So that's the story of Yisro. It's the Torah begins specifically with Vayishma Yisro. Yisro heard. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, of blessed memory, he had this idea that he talked about how the verb Vayishma in Hebrew has so many different meanings, and every language is unique in terms of where the nuances are. He says in Hebrew, you say "Hear, O Israel," but it's so. I mean, it's not "Hear, O Israel." The word Shema in the Shema means so much else other than hear. Hear is the most passive of all the meanings. I guess you hear something, whether you want to or not. It means listen. It means understand. It means obey. It means all these things. Rashi tells us at different points. With a Shema Yisrael El HaChokim, it means obey the laws. When it says Shema Yisrael Hashem Hashem Echad, it really means listen or absorb and understand. Hashem is one. Open your ears, be receptive. So here, Yisro heard, right? So you can read it literally. Yisro heard everything that Hashem did to the Jewish people. But then again, the problem with that meaning is everybody heard it. Yisro didn't have any unique access to news channels. So the implication is that Yisro heard. He didn't just hear what happened, but there was something else. Yisro had an understanding and a perception that other people lacked. This is something that is pointed out. Yisro was around at a time when there was major international news. That was all the events that surrounded the Jews leaving Egypt, and yet he's the only documented case. Well, there were the Arab, rather the mixed bag of the basket of deplorables that came with the Jews out of Egypt, and were generally a thorn in their side. But Yisro is the only one, I think, that we would mention as a really held up as a shining example of a sincere convert, and not only that he valued the Jewish people, but that she says he left a position of comfort, wealth, and prestige, and he came out to the desert to join the Jewish people. Now, he was obviously motivated by hearing some very miraculous events, but as we see, so did everyone else. They did not have the same reaction. As a matter of fact, we say in Az Yashir, as we read last week, the Jews sang, after they crossed the Red Sea, they sang about the great miracles, and included in the song is a description of how the various nations, Edom, Ammon, Moab, Canaan, they all trembled, and they were speechless and stunned and shocked. And what happened? Nothing that we can, nothing that we know of. There was no real meaningful impact from any of that. And Rachav Hazona was another example. It says that when Yehoshua, after the passing of Moshe, he passed the leadership onto Yehoshua at Hashem's instruction, and Yehoshua sent 2 spies of his own to scout out the land of Canaan. It worked much better than the spies that Moshe sent. These spies were righteous people. They came back with the right. They left and came back with the right message for. Then they were sheltered by a woman named Rachav who lived in the city of Jericho, and she helped them, and she said, "You should know that everyone is completely terrified. Everyone and all of my people are aware that you are coming, and they know that the reports of Hashem's miracles have completely." Now she ends up converting, and I think she married, who was it?
Yoshua.
Yoshua, right. But apparently everyone else, they just got scared. They didn't do anything. It didn't lead to any positive. Yeah, okay. But Yisro as well, we're told that he, according to some opinions at least, when Moshe first comes to the well, when he's a young man fleeing the land of Egypt, and he meets Yisro's daughters at the well, and it says that Yisro's daughters were being harassed by the other shepherds, and Moshe had to rescue them, and that was because Yisro had been excommunicated by his countrymen because he rejected idol worship, and he had. Rashi mentions in this parasha that he says, "Now I know Hashem is greater than all the other gods." It says Yisro had sampled everything, all of the different deities were worshipped, and he came to the conclusion that they were all nonsense. But apparently, these events of the Exodus really. I mean, even with Moshe Rabbeinu as a son-in-law, it sounds like that wasn't, he wasn't quite there. And it may be that, Torah is not explicit about it. Maybe he already believed in Hashem, but he hadn't acted on that belief. Just like in the times of Avram Avinu, Avram was not the only person who believed in one God, but he acted upon it in a very specific way. In Avram's case, the decision to reach out and teach people. In Yisro's case, it was a decision to leave his country and join the Jewish people and actually become part of their society. Yeah. It does mention that. Rashi says it says it kind of says it explicitly in the Torah after Yisro sits down with Moshe. Moshe tells him about all of the things that they've experienced, and he says, "Now I know Hashem is greater than all other gods because the thing that they plotted was visited upon them." That's the way I believe Rashi translates it, which basically means that they tried to kill the Jews, drown the Jewish Redeemer with water, and they were themselves drowned. So the Midah, the measure for measure, really struck Yisro powerfully. I remember hearing another interpretation, which also eye-opening. It says that Rashi mentions a few things. He says, Rashi says, "What did Yisro hear?" I think he mentions the splitting of the sea and the battle of Amalek, and I think there may be a couple of other things mentioned, but those two. Let me see if it's exactly what Rashi says. Yeah, the splitting of the sea and the battle of Amalek. So why is that? The battle with Amalek was the previous episode mentioned in the Torah at the end of last week's parasha. So it is reasonable to assume that the Torah juxtaposes it to the statement that Yisro heard because it was one of the things that he had heard. It is also reasonable to assume that he heard about the splitting of the sea because the entire world heard about that. So that's for the simple reading of Rashi. It does seem a little strange that the war with Amalek, because what was so inspiring about that? If you read it simply, it doesn't sound like there was a miracle at all. It sounds like the Jews were attacked and that maybe some damage was done. They basically won the war, but that it doesn't sound like anything that would make. I mean, it's the first example of anti-Semitism, I guess. So say like what is being Jewish about? Like crossing the sea and being attacked by bad people. It could be that the Torah is not that explicit. Maybe Rashi does say that Moshe got the sun to stand still. Maybe there was some miraculous aspect of the war. But someone said, I don't remember who says this interpretation. He says, Yisro heard about the splitting of the sea. Okay, it was a great miracle, very inspiring. But then Yisro heard that about the war with Amalek. Now, what was the message of the war with Amalek? After it's done, Hashem tells Moshe to write this down and make sure to impress it upon Yehoshua because he'll be the next leader. There's an eternal battle with Amalek. And what was so bad about Amalek? So, as we know, we're getting up to Purim, coming down the pipeline. Amalek represents the force that directly, existentially opposes the recognition of Hashem in this world. Right? Whatever the world is supposed to be, what the Jewish people specifically are given the mission to do, which is to increase awareness of Hashem in the world. Amalek's whole goal is to obfuscate that. This is why Hashem says that there's an eternal battle with Hashem, with Amalek from generation to generation. Everyone else, they want power, they want money, they don't like the Jews, make them uncomfortable, whatever the reason, they're jealous, whatever the reason may be. Amalek just simply stands for the eradication of the Jewish people. Hitler recognized this, and they say that in his writings. He says there's only one real struggle: is us and the Jewish people. Everything else is, people. They say take people seriously. Hitler had a certain clarity of vision that most people do not have. He was evil, but he saw it for what it was, and it seems almost hard to believe, so that we know explicitly from the Torah that there is a force like that in human nature that opposes Hashem directly. There is a medrash, I think it might be in Parshas Peshalach. I didn't see it this year, but I think I saw it last year. It says, someone wants to attack the king, and there's a statue of the king on a pedestal, so he strikes the pedestal to knock down the statue. The analogy is that you mentioned in the Song of the Sea, Hashem, destroys his enemies, those who rise up against him, or those who rise up against Hashem, those who rise up against the Jewish people. He quotes a pasuk in Tehillim, I think that basically says that. So Chazal are telling us explicitly that attacking the Jewish people, at least in some cases, is basically just a desire to attack Hashem, and that this is what he can do it, by attacking the Jewish people. So we have to take that as take it for what it says. So such a force exists. Now Amalek, so they attacked the Jewish people, and they lost. They lost the war. And Rashi says that the Torah tells us Yisro weakened them by killing powerful warriors and not destroying them completely. Rashi says this was clearly a divine command. They were not supposed to be completely eradicated. The world wasn't ready. The Jewish people weren't worthy yet of complete destruction of Amalek. But what did Amalek accomplish? That was they had a very bad heart. But what was the great damage? We read Parshas Zachor. Remember what Amalek did? What was so bad? So the example is given of the hot bathtub where nobody would dare jump in, and when rascal jumps in, he gets burned. But now other people can jump in as well. So Amalek, they burst the bubble. Everyone was, all the nations were terrified. Maybe it didn't lead to anything, but at least they had that aura. Maybe it would have led to something. Maybe I don't know. I'm just speculating. Maybe if Amalek hadn't come and burst the bubble, maybe some of those individuals, besides Rachel and besides Yisro, people would have said, would have gotten to thinking. But when Amalek attacked the Jews, they didn't win. If anything, you would have think it would reinforce the nation's fear of getting close to the Jews. But it didn't happen. It doesn't work that way. If Israel wins the 6-day war, Israel is suddenly untouchable. But then they have the Yom Kippur War, they suffer some loss. They still win, but all of a sudden they're not invincible. Well, they still lost, right? But when someone, as human beings, we operate based on emotion, not based on logic. Logically, if someone appears to be untouchable, then they get attacked and the attacker loses, you'd say, okay, so that reinforces the fact it's not a good idea. But psychologically, I thought they were untouchable. I say they are touchable. Maybe you'll die if you touch them, but they're still touchable. So that was what Amalek did. They accomplished their goal. Their goal was, the goal was always to oppose awareness of Hashem in this world, and they succeeded because they darkened. They diminished the aura. So they cooled down the hot bath. They lowered the temperature. So when Hashem performed these miracles, and it was meant to send a message, Hashem could have saved the Jews in many easy and quick ways. I mean, for Hashem, everything is easy. But as Moshe himself says, Hashem did these miracles to make a point. And the point that Hashem wanted to make is not an intellectual point. Hashem exists. That's easy enough to say. The point is to create that emotional reality in the hearts of people who have a lot of resistance to it, but to really break through. And with the drama and the spectacle of these miracles to get this message across, and the message came across, and Amalek took it in the wrong direction. They didn't undo it, but the Chil Hashem is weakening the aura of Hashem's presence, is opposing the fabric of creation. The whole purpose of existence is Kiddush Hashem, sanctifying the name of Hashem. Every mitzvah adds to that total momentum of creating that um, emotional reality of Hashem's presence in the world, and anything that chips away at that is Amalek. So Yisro said the following: the sea split, and it made an impression on everyone in the world, including me. Good. Okay. I'm uplifted by these events. And he saw a nation that reacted to those events by doing exactly the opposite. And he said, wait a second. That means Amalek was also impacted by these events, but impacted in the wrong way. Instead of saying, wow, Hashem exists, and I better, they said, Hashem exists, let's attack that concept, and then let's drown it out. And if a human being can do that, then I can't be comfortable just saying, I'll stay here in Midian and I will learn the lesson. See, although I may feel impacted by the miracles, I see if you don't actively choose to be impacted in a positive way, you can be unimpacted or even impacted in the opposite way. So you're supposed to say, I got to pick myself up and go. I have to do something more. So hearing that about the splitting of the sea and then the subsequent acts of Amalek taught Yisro that we have to make our own choices. We can't just say, whatever happens, I'll absorb the message, because this is what we say about even about the Jews. It talks about how they crossed the sea and they sang the song, and it's a big deal. We sing the song every day as part of Sukkot Zimra. The Medrash says, we preface, actually, we don't just read the Yashir itself, we read the two sentences in the Torah preceding it. Hashem saved the Jews, and the Jews saw the great miracles, and they believed in Hashem, and they had fear of Hashem. The Midrashim that make a few comments, but they basically talk about this process, how they crossed the Red Sea, they experienced a great fear of Hashem, and that they a deep belief in Hashem, and they sang the song, and this was a great spiritual attainment. And when you read quickly and superficially, you say, well, they crossed the sea. It was pretty amazing. They burst into song. That's not what happened. They crossed the sea and they developed fear of Hashem. Fear of Hashem is considered the goal of human efforts and self-perfection. And the Medrash says they achieved a high level of fear of Hashem. And case in point, it says the fear of Hashem led to belief in Hashem. That doesn't sound like it makes sense at all, right? The belief in Hashem must have preceded the fear of Hashem, and it must have been a natural result of crossing the Red Sea and seeing the Egyptians drown and the Jews came across. That's not what happened. The belief in Hashem resulted from the fear of Hashem. So how does that make any sense? The answer is we're not talking about a natural reaction. Anybody can walk across the sea and believe in Hashem. We're talking about what the Jews did with that on a conscious level. And the belief in Hashem that comes from, wow, the sea split, there must be a God that lasts. It's very short-lived. See what happened to the other nations. They felt fear. They didn't change. They didn't stop being idol worshippers. Some even fought against it. The Jews crossed the Red Sea, and the first thing they did was develop fear of Hashem, which is always a conscious choice. That doesn't happen by itself. It was self-development. I guess they did it rather quickly, but they chose to internalize these events in a way which changed them up from the inside. The fear of Hashem led to belief in Hashem. Belief in Hashem is something of infinite levels, because even Avraham Avinu was praised for his belief in Hashem, and he's tested for his belief in Hashem. So they accessed higher and higher levels of belief that were built on the fear of Hashem, which itself is obviously built on knowing that Hashem exists. So knowing that Hashem exists, that's just the foundation. That's first base. Knowing that Hashem exists can lead to fear of Hashem. Fear of Hashem can lead to belief in Hashem. All of these things were not natural results of crossing the Red Sea. Crossing the Red Sea gave the Jews an opportunity to attain these levels, and when they did, they experienced an aspect of prophecy. It wasn't full prophecy, but they Ruach HaKodesh, to sing the song that we sing today, it became part of the Torah. This was a reward for the great work that we did. You'd say, what kind of reward does a person deserve from believing Hashem after they crossed the Red Sea? The answer is, lots of people can experience the same event and can have any number of reactions, ranging from positive even to negative. And the fact that the Jews came out of this experience uplifted and with a strengthened faith, it was their credit. It was their hard work. It was not an automatic and natural result. That's what we have to recognize. That's what Yisro recognized. He said, look, I'm not like they didn't cross the sea, but they heard about it, and you see how what it did for them. It did the opposite. So there's no such thing as experiences don't change you. You don't become anything as a result of anything. You become something as a result of what you make yourself into. And the experiences that you go through give you the opportunity to do that work. But if you don't do it, it will dissipate or even, even have the opposite effect. So that's what we learned from Yisro. Yisro made the conscious choice, which most people do not. And we have to learn from Yisro as well. Whatever experiences we have experiences, whether it's Yom Kippur, and as we get older, we tend to recognize this more. That I'm going to wake up tomorrow, we're going to feel the same way. When we have an experience that takes us out of our rut and enables us to think differently about ourselves and about life, we have to recognize that this is very temporary, but it is an opportunity. If in that moment we can do some work, make a decision or change something, we can try to make sure that we utilize the opportunity, utilize the leverage that it gives us, the force and the motivation to make some kind of adjustment, to do something. That can be a lasting decision. Yisro made the decision. He went to his travel agent. He booked tickets to the Midbar. We can do something, sign up for a class or, make up to, be careful, Muktan Shabbos, right? Whatever it may be. Someone said when you, I think the Rebbe in Yeshiva said, when you get inspired, take the TV and throw it out the window. And you won't have the TV anymore. And 15 minutes later, you may think better, but the TV is already or smashed into the. Yeah, can be done. So that's what we have to learn from Yisro. And
and I was talking that we have become more aware on Shabbos of a potential Muslim situation or what was. Thank God we're okay.
Yeah.
We do. But could this be? We didn't think of this before as being a Muslim.
Right. Chazal says in Lashon Hara, he says people are so overwhelmed and it's so difficult because people are so sort of immersed in it, but he says, when you start with learning the halachas, people feel like, why should I learn it? I can't keep it. He says, you'll be surprised that you start with an awareness. And over time, you'll discover that you'll develop an instinctive realization. You'll feel the words on your tongue as they're ready to emerge, and you'll be able to. He says it takes time, but it develops. A person starts with just thinking about it, and then eliminating some of the more obvious problematic speech, and then over time, eventually the needle moves and you reach the tipping point, and you'll actually be more sensitive. It'll be, instead of being a natural thing, forbidden speech will become unnatural. Okay. So, it's a wonderful week. I'm going to sign off, and hopefully we'll get together next week again at the same time.
Thank you, Rabbi.